Okay, we are live. Very good. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Hope everyone had a good holiday and enjoyed your Yom Tovim. I certainly did. We were by the Rebbe and had a great time for Sukkot and Simchas Torah. Filled up the spiritual tank and now ready to rock and roll. Okay, so let's get hopping right in. We are on Parshas Noach. We did not, of course, get to do Bereshis because it was the holiday, the Simchas Torah last week. But basically, I'm not going to go into the whole sikha, but the Rebbe explained how in the beginning, of course, God created everything, and that he chose the bodies of the Jewish people, not the souls, to be his chosen selection for his godly soul. And that's why we have a specific mission in this world. And now we're moving on into Parshas Noach, which is the second Parsha of the Torah. And we're going to talk about our role. In the beginning, we spoke, well, we didn't speak, but last week, the Rebbe spoke about Bereshis and how that was, God's impetus to start the world. And in Noach, now we're going to speak a little bit about how after God has created the world, it is our job, it is our mission to keep it flowing, keep it going, to keep things moving in the right direction. And that's the work of mankind. And let's hop right in. Okay, Shabbos Parshas Noach, from Sichos Parshas Noach. Aleph. Shabbos Parshas Noachi Shabbos Klalit. So the Rebbe starts off by saying that in Noah, it is a general Shabbos. The Yosh Shabbos Rishon Shabbat Nishlamas ba'avodas teshish mehamaser shla'achar Shabbos Bereshis. So Rebbe says it's a very important Shabbos coming up because we are now entering the first actual work week. In other words, Parshas Bereshis, which we celebrated this Shabbos, was the first culmination of the week of God's creating the world, right? We know God created the world in 6 days, on the seventh day he rested, but mankind was created on Erev Shabbos, literally 4 hours before Shabbat. And so this is our first work week. In other words, God's first week of work was last week in Bereshis when he created the world. But our first week of world is the first work of week, in the world is now. When we've entered into the world, we already passed the first Shabbat, and now we're working. Kamud Gash b'Shema Parshas Noach, Melasha Menucha, and we know that the name Noach is from the same lashon, the same kind of root of Menucha, which is resting or calm or peace, if you will. Nichaya v'rucha, shehi b'chinas shavisa ka'adam hashavuos b'malchusay, כמו שכתוב ושבועס ביום השביעי ותרגומו נוח ביום השביעי, היינו שבשם הפרשה מודגש כללוס עניין של שם יום השבת. So the idea of Noach, which is the parsha we're in, of course, is indicative also of Shabbat, which is menucha or resting. So let's explain this a different way. Shabbos Bereshis he Shabbos Klalis. As we said, that Shabbos Bereshis is a general Shabbos. That's the first Shabbos of the year. As our rabbis teach us, however, one conducts themselves on Shabbos Bereshis, that's the stage for their whole upcoming year. As we said a second ago, that Shabbos Bereshis is indicative of the general work of God that was completed in the first week. And also, this includes the 7 days of the work week that draws down throughout the whole year. Shabbos Shavua Hozrim v'Nishanim Oisei Sheva Yamim v'Yom Rishon ad Yom HaShabbat Shavas Yemei HaHakef Klal This Kol HaMeshech HaZman. So we have the same concept of we begin the work week on Yom Rishon, the first day of the week, which is the first day that God actually started his work, and then it ends on the 5th day of the week. On the 6th day of the week, which is Yom Shishi, which is Erev Shabbos, and then of course Shabbat is the resting time. ומזה מובן גם בשבס נוח היא שבס כלליס, יהיה שבס הראשון שבו נשלם בעבודת ששת ימי המעשה, because it's the first, it's called a general Shabbat, because it is the first Shabbat that is kept after the 6 days of the work week. Shavua HaRishon, which is the first week of actual work. And this includes the entire work weeks that are drawn down for the entire year. Okay. Nimsa Shabbos Bereshis Klalos Avoda the Kol Yemei HaShavua Kafi Shuhi B'Koach Shabbos Parshas Noach. So the 6 days of creation in general are the service of all the days of the week and affect the whole year, and they give the power for Shabbos Parshas Noach, right? Klo Mahaveh Evan Abuchin. The Avoda the Kol Yemei HaShavua Kafi Shuhu B'Flal. That brings it into actuality. So Shabbat is a very amazing, interesting day. It has the power of resting when you actually rest from the 6 days of work before it. And it also gives the power to bless the upcoming work week. It gives you the power to get through the upcoming week. And that's where we're in right now, right? The last Shabbos ended the work week for God, so to speak, and gave the power for each one of us to do our work, which is in where right now, which we started this week for already. Base. So we have to understand the connection to what's going on in this week's parsha. And the similar ideas between last week's parsha, Noach, and this week's, Bereshis, and this week's parsha, Noach. Brias koidem ha'oidem. Parshas Bereshis, the Parshas Bereshis most so far, oidus Brias hoidem. And Parshas Bereshis, we had the whole story of creation. It is, by most accounts, one of the most exciting. It is by far the most commented on parsha of the Torah. We know that Bereshis is like massive in the amount of commentary, the amount of Kabbalah, the amount of depth that is inside the parsha. Everything from the creation of the worlds, the spiritual worlds. There's a lot of underlying deep Kabbalistic concepts. How the 6 days of the week and Shabbat are connected to the different 7 Sfirot, which originated from Zar Anpin of the world of Atzilus and drew down through Bria. It's a whole complex system of how the creation took place, as well as the creation of Adam and Chava, the first man and the first woman, and their interaction with the snake in the garden. I mean, tons and tons of depth to unpack there. And that was the main focus of last week's Parsha, the story of creation and how God created the world. Bereshis bara Elokim etzar shamayim v'sa'aretz, that God created the heavens and the earth. And these are the offspring of the heavens and earth that it created. And then in Parshas Noach, so Noach has a shift. This is the covenant God says that I'm giving to my you and your offspring. The Doris Oilam Ar Keshte Nitneba in Inyan. So always Beres B'nei Ovin Hearts. That's the rainbow God used as a sign that said, I'm making this a covenant to let you know I'm not going to destroy the world again, right? So all these morons out there who are spending infinite amounts of money and time, and it's all distractions to keep people off from what they're really focusing on doing, which is trying to take over the world. And these green save the planet and get rid of plastic straws and all these movements, it's all crap. Because God promises in this week's parsha, I will not destroy the world again. I destroyed it once and I'm not going to destroy it again. You don't have to worry about that. What you need to worry about is working on mankind and our own ethics and morals and getting to the bottom of why there's so many problems, interpersonal problems with people. It's not because of landfills with plastic straws. That's not going to solve the world's problems. And that's the idea. As in Parshas Bereshis, God set the stage, and it was all about how God created the world. Parshas Noach is a shift. It's a shift where God basically says, I did my job of creating the world. Obviously, God continues to create the world, or it wouldn't exist. But now he said, I'm entering your work into this world. And now we're going to shift the focus onto what you are meant to do and what mankind's role and responsibility is to sustain and fulfill and keep the world going and flowing. Again, without God's influence, that couldn't happen. But we're talking about our individual partnership with God, if you will. And the difference between these two parshas in Shabbos Bereshis is speaking about the completion of the creation of the world. And discusses how God himself created the world and brought it into existence. כפי צריך לחויס מצר רצון הקדוש ברוך הוא, לא יכול להיות קיים העולם. And therefore you saw the world, כשהעולם יורד מדרגה, and that when there's a descent in the world, when it went down, on the side of the will of Hashem, it is not able, in other words, to fulfill it. This is about Parshas, a little flash of Bereshis. V'ras Hashem called Rabba as Adam ha'aretz. God saw that he did. Yinachem v'yomer ha'amcha. But Parshas Noach medubar oidir shleimus ha'odam k'fi shehu metzad atzmai. Shegam shemetzad yiroid nitain koach lebiroid v'zucha odam. And therefore it says God in the first, again, just to kind of reframe this, in the first weeks of Bereshis, he said, I created the world. And I'm giving you the power. I'm imbuing man with the power to become my partners in creation. How? By rectifying and purifying the world that I have graciously given to you. And all these matters that are connected to the world. That he made a covenant and said, your job is now to keep the world in a state of sustainment. God basically said, listen, I created the world, and I intentionally created it incomplete, meaning there needs to be some tuning, some polishing up of the world. And how do you do that? I'm going to give you a Torah. I'm going to give the Torah, and I'm going to give the Torah to all mankind. It's to the Jewish people who have 613 commandments, to the whole nations of the world that have 7 commandments. And God said, by fulfilling my will, you will help bring the world to a state of completion. And in fact, the rainbow is not a positive thing, by the way. I know there are particular groups who decided to take the rainbow as their symbol, which is quite ironic because it is not something pleasing to God. In other words, there's a special blessing we say on a rainbow, but you're not supposed to tell someone else, oh, look, there's a rainbow. Because a rainbow is basically God saying, oh, by the way, I'm not happy right now. Okay, according to science, there's different gases that are left over from certain types of atmospheric pressure, from rain, whatever. Yeah, fine. But the point is that the inner intention of the rainbow is God saying, listen, I'm not happy. And if I let my anger arise, I could have the potential to destroy the world right now. That shows you how pissed I am. But I'm not going to do that because I made a covenant with Noah. And therefore, the sign of the rainbow is not the pleasant thing. It's basically God saying, listen, I'm not happy, and but I'm reminding you that I did make a covenant. I made an agreement. I'm not going to destroy the world because I want to live in the world. And why would I want to destroy a world that I want to live in? And therefore, instead, what I'm doing is I'm giving you tools on how to help transform this world. Explain in a different way. Did I say explain? That's not a word. Explained in a different way. But Parshas Bereshis mudgash be'ikar mimomod u'matzav ha'olam kafishu betzad hakavana elyoina. Parshas Noach mudgash be'ikar mimomod u'matzav ha'olam kafishu betzad avodas ha'adam. Explain it a different way. Parshas Breshis says emphasize the main purpose of the world from the intention from above, God's power. And Parshas Noach is emphasizing the main work in the world connected to us in action below, man. Because this is the lowest world. There's numerous spiritual worlds and spiritual beings, and this is the lowest one, if you will, meaning the world of what we say Asiya, the physical world down here. What does this say? 1 second. Okay, I don't want to do that. And therefore, it's a situation, God says, to rectify and refine the world, to bring the world to its completion, if you will. Okay, Gil. And let's go a little bit deeper into this idea. And we said through the service and actuality of adding on to what God already created, to helping make the world better. That's why it says at the end of Parshas Breshis, it says, and Noach, because God was pissed at the end of Parshas Breshis. There was a lot of nasty stuff going on that is not enumerated in the Torah so much, but we know that it was really bad. Every possible part thought of debauchery, of the worst horrific things that one could imagine were taking place between animals and humans, and every type of horrific sacrifice and every sexual depravity that you can't even begin to possibly fathom, worse than the stuff you see in Amsterdam and the live sex shows. Some weird people over there. And God was like, you know what? What did I do here? Why did I create a world when there's going to be so much disgustingness in it? Let me just destroy it. But then all of a sudden, Noah was born and said, well, hold on a second. I think we have someone who is a little bit righteous over here and is going to help the situation. And God created the heavens and earth. So it says, Lamed Beis Pa'amim Elokim, not more of Masa Bereshis. 32 times God's name Elokim is used in creation. For those of you who join our Kabbalah class on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we're starting back up again this week. We are learning Sefer Yetzirah, which opens up about these 32 mystical paths of wisdom that God used to create the worlds. And they're referenced by the fact that it says God's name Adonai connected to creation 32 times. 32 is Gematria Lev, or the heart. And the whole Sefer Yetzirah, which we're delving into on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock, is all about this deep connection to this number 32, which is the heart, and how God engraved his wisdom inside of our hearts, and how the journey of the Torah is in fact a journey of each one of our souls, and each one of our own individual pathways to our divine purpose and fulfillment in life. And we get into that in depth in the Sefer Yetzirah on Wednesday nights. And that's what he says over here, 32 times Elokim is used, talking about creation. Kivan shebriasa oilam hu ayidei. What's happening, Dove? Shem Elokim, because God actually brought the world into existence through the name Elokim. Elokim is Gematria Hatever, which means the nature. And we've discussed at length. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but God's name of Havaya is from a higher level of godly energy that was too powerful to create the world, or that godly energy would be too intense. It would kind of be like a sun without an ozone layer to protect the earth. It would just melt. And so therefore he protected the earth with an ozone, and he did the same idea with his name Havaya, and he brought Elokim, and what he created is known to us as nature. Nature just basically means that God's hiding. It's a lavush, it's a garment that God puts on to conceal himself from the world so we can have free choice. But the reality is that God and dark, God and light, every aspect, it's all God. וגם בהמשך הפרשה, ביום העשויס הווי אלוקים את הארץ ושמיים. אז זה באופן ששם הוויה, why the screen keeps flickering. Midabesh Vithelem B'Shem Elokim. And what it's referring to is the fact that God concealed his name Havaya, his higher level name, into the name Elokim, just like he concealed himself in nature. That even though the power of bringing up creation came through his higher name Havaya, because Havaya is from Lashon Mahavet, or to create, to bring about. Nevertheless, it was brought about through concealing it in the name Elokim, as we said above, which was hiding inside of it. And therefore, Havaya was not revealed to the creations. In fact, only the name Elokim. That's why when Pharaoh said, "Who is this Havaya?" I don't know who he is, because Pharaoh was not capable of tapping into that deeper level of reality of knowing of there is God that is above the world, that's controlling the world. And the unique thing about Noach, that he found favor in God's eyes, and it was revealed in the world, that this was a revelation of the name Havaya, which is above the world. And the existence of the world was brought about through the name Elokim, which was really the name Havaya inside of it, as we said, but it was concealed. And furthermore, to recognize and reveal that Havaya is Elokim, right? Like we say on the end of Yom Kippur 7 times, Havayahu Elokim. That means in every level of concealed reality, it's the same Havaya. Meaning that when God is giving things that appear to our limited eyes as blessings and good, it's the same God who is concealing and hiding things from our eyes that appear to be bad. Because the God of darkness and the God of light is the same God. That even the concealment and contraction is truly the name Havaya. In other words, from God's perspective, there are no garments, there are no enclothing, there are no levels. Everything's godliness. It's only from our perspective that we have to work very hard to peel back the layers of reality and reveal the God that is concealed within it. And the deeper we go into our own reality, from learning Torah, of course, doing mitzvot, deep meditation, deep contemplation of God and godly concepts, learning a lot of Chassidus, working on yourself, the more you go deeper into your own hearts, the more you will find God. That's correct, Matthew. Pharaoh is the ultimate zenith of ego, of self, of I, of self-awareness, of I, of the feeling that I'm in charge. I control everything. I control my life. I control my future. I created the world around me. I created all the success, whatever the case may be. And such a level, there's no awareness of, there's an awareness that God created the world. You know, if you look in the idolatrous practices and nations, none of them denied the existence of God. They believed that God created the world and then left it alone, and the world became a giant social Darwinism experiment, which is survival of the fittest. The strong survive and the weak don't. And therefore, their concept of God is just a concept of God within the nature, just like the animal kingdom of, might equals right, whatever the case may be. And therefore, there is no place for a God that is above this, that creates it and sustains it and is having a much deeper level of reality that is available to us. But to do that, you need to subject and surrender your ego, which takes a lot of work, because the ego is not something that gets removed. It gets something that even in Far East practices, in the most subtle way, there's ego involved. right? It's because your whole goal of your ego is to dissolve your ego, and everything is about dissolving your ego, which is also in ego. So you can minimize it, but it's like a shadow. It keeps following you. So it's a continuous lifelong work. Okay. And there we see that even in Havaya, even in Elohim, which is the concealed aspect of God, is Havaya, which is the deeper reality of God. And the whole goal of creation, and every time we live in a Torah way, we conduct our lives in accordance with how God is asking of us. We are revealing Havaya into the world of Elohim that's concealing them. And we're, to the untrained eye, may not be seen, but what we're doing is we're revealing godliness into the world. Every time we say a blessing, every time we do a good deed, every time we're in following God's path in a positive way, what we're doing is we're revealing this inner aspect of God. And the more you do it in your own life, the more you start building a real relationship with God, right? Yeah. We said I said 7 times in the end of Yom Kippur, Havaya Elokim. This is revealing God into the nature. The only difference between a miracle and nature is frequency of occurrence. If it happens in a very rare, once in a lifetime event, we call it a miracle. If it happens every day, we call it nature. But it is miraculous, every aspect of creation. Dalit. ויש לומר שעניין זה במרומז בתוכנית של פרשת נוח אוידוס קיים העולם באופן לא ישבוסי והבריאס as kastin nisan in. And that's what God says. I will not destroy the world again. Al Gore, find a different job. He's made billions of dollars selling lies. It's not just him. It's just a propaganda machine of the green world and save the planet and all these things. Because God promises us, here, I'm not going to destroy the world again. I'm making a covenant with creation. Lo yishevoisi. K'mavur b'kama pa'amim kama makomot shinhaga sa'edan ba'ifan tamidi. Weird. Lo shinoi v'hefsech. God says, I will not cause a separation in the world again. It will continue on. Just like the sun rises every day. Does anyone wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, I hope the sun rises today? What if it doesn't rise? I hope the stars are going to be out tonight. I hope the planets are still going to be there. Is the moon still there? No one thinks about that because God says, I'm going to continue that. I'm not going to stop it. Just like I'm going to continue all of creation. And if one is perceptive, they will see that it is God who brings these things into existence. The stars, the planets, the moon, the sun, all these elements of so-called nature don't just happen themselves. God brings them into it. And God says, I don't change. I created a world, and that world is here for us to enjoy together. But the world does not have an impact on God. God is above the world. He creates the world. היא מתשקפת כרני השמש בהעין. היינו שגם מעין העולם מן הארץ. נעשה משחק אש ומתקף בו האור השמש הוויה. אוקיי. ובגימל עניינים אלו קישורים זה לזה. שקיים בעולם מודגש שרי הקשת. That God says, I will agree to keep the world in a state of continuous existence and flow. That's the rainbow is the symbol I'm making to show you that even if I'm pissed and I want to destroy the world, I'm not going to, because I'm making a covenant with Noah that I'm not going to do it. And this is a covenant, God said, that I'm making between you and your children and your offspring and all flesh among the earth. To realize that God says, I'm the one who sustains the world, and I'm the one who gives the power for everyone else to do what they need to do. Yes, correct. Shezehu in Shem Havaya Melashon Hamahaveh. And that's why God's name Havaya is comes from Haveh, means to bring about, to create. That even though God's existence is above the world, he is, he was, and he will be. It's all the same. God is above time. He's above creation. Shema Etzem, because the essence of God creates time. He creates past, present, and future. And only God, through his power of his atzmus, for his essence, had the ability to bring about what we say is yesh ma'ayim. Nothing, no one ever in the history of the world cannot impossible create something from nothing. Only God. There are many scientists that can take something and change it and alter it and adapt it and clone it and do whatever they want, but they can't create the building blocks of creation. Impossible. That's what we say is from the power of the Ein Sof, of God's power is infinite power. That nothing existed before God. God forbid. God preceded everything, as the Rambam says in the beginning of his Mishnah Torah's magnum opus. Nothing existed before God. God creates everything. Him and him alone has the power and the capability of bringing about creation from absolutely nothing. And we can acknowledge and recognize the true existence of this physical world. That this physicality of this world is a creation of God. Hey, in addition to this, and furthermore, we can see that through our service and actuality, which we learn in this week's Parsha, regarding the initial beginning of creation, that God did it himself. Marumas b'Parshas Lech Lecha, shematchil in the Kuroi Tefillah Mincha b'Shabbos Parshas Noach, and as we read Lech Lecha in Mincha of Shabbos, b'Siyum Shivas Yemei HaHaikach, HaShavua HaRishon LaAvodas HaOlam. Lech Lecha. This is the next stage after Noach, of course. Mora'ah Halicha Amitis. This is talking about true moving. Lech Lecha, which we're going to get into with God's help next Sikha. And the Rebbe says, Halicha Amitis is real movement. In other words, we think we're moving sometimes when we're just spinning wheels, if you know what I mean. How do you know you're spinning wheels when nothing's really changing in your life? You know, we're waiting for something to happen. Something's going to happen. Spinning, because we're not really moving. We're going through the motions. There's a difference between what we say is rote, where you're just, you plug into your battery pack every day, you wake up and you tick, 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 and you just go in automatic mode, as most people do, because life is complicated. But real Lech Lecha is traveling. What does it mean? The Rebbe says to go to a place that is not in comparison at all to where you were before. And he doesn't mean by picking up and moving to Europe. He means in a spiritual journey, in a mission to connect to God, in a mission to connect to our true purpose and our true identity in the world. We have to go out of ourselves. We have to become uncomfortable. We have to do things that are outside of our current scope or reality, right? We've all become imprisoned here more than anywhere, where we're afraid because, things are stable in our life. And a lot of times people don't like chaos. They like stability. Something's wrong with that speaking properly. Stability in their life. Meaning, even if their life isn't so good, at least they know what their life's about. But to take a chance, a jump, a while, to go something out of your comfort zone, most people don't do. And that's not really Lech Lecha. That's not really traveling, because you're not really moving. So in Parshas Lech Lecha, the Rebbe is just giving us a foretaste right now. It says, where's this true place you're going to? What is this true movement? God says, I'm going to reveal it to you. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to show you when you trust me. In other words, I'm not going to show you what's on the other side. You have to jump. And then I will show you what? I will show you you. I will show you who you really are. We all look at ourselves in a distorted image. We are not who we think we are. We're much more. We're so trapped in a traumatic base of a limited consciousness of everything that's compiled into us our whole lives, from all the information from parents, from teachers, from media, from all this stuff. And we've locked ourselves into a fear-based model of what we think we are, what we think we're capable of. And it's so much bigger. But you have to trust God. God's saying, jump, jump, and I'm going to show you who you really are. And the Rebbe says, through the service of actuality in the world, I will reveal the true existence of every single Yid, of every Jew, in every single situation, wherever you may be, that we have a complete oneness with God. And not only that, through your service, the Rebbe says, of refining and rectifying the world, you will reveal godliness in the world. And in your own lives. Yes, Lamasha in Shaidiz and Nasa in Halichas Gamba Dargas Elokus. Shemiz Gala meet this in the Achtu Savaya Havayu Elokim. Shagam Shem Elokim Kashor Im Babriazoid, Metsias Mitis Ho, Shem Avire Shmalava. And the Rebbe says, and when you do this Lech Lecha, when you go out of your comfort zone, when you take and really trust in God and go to a level you never dreamed capable of, I will show you how Havaya is Elokim. That all the concealments in your life will become revealed. And you'll realize I'm with you, I've been with you, and I will always be with you. And now you're going to establish a new relationship with God where he feels present in your life. Not it's just that it's what we say, makif, something like, yeah, I know God's there, but I don't think he's with me in this. He doesn't, no, in your being. But and this work week of Parshas Noach affects our entire work week of the whole year. What does it mean? שהעבודה בפועל השנה הדשה. נמצאים כבר בתוכן, לבויכן כל פרטי איני נבורה דשש מהמעשה, בדיום השבס, על מנס לתיקון להשלם הכל ענייני העבודה בפועל ותקליט השלמות. Wow, very powerful. The Rebbe explains that this Shabbos we have to do a cheshbon tzedek, a righteous accounting, just like Erev Rosh Hashanah. And we say, how did my first week of work go in the world? Now we have to understand something. When God and the Rebbe talk about our work week, it's not the same work week we think about. We think about a work week of how did I do in my office? How did I do in my job? Did I get good results in my work this week? That's not the work for God. The real work we're talking about is revealing Havaya and Elokim. That is the actual work that we are doing in this world. It is how do we reveal a God that is concealed? And the true work that we do is this work. And that's why Shabbos is so holy, because in Shabbos we rest from this work because God reveals himself. God says, as hard as you worked all week long to reveal me in your life in the world, on Shabbos, that's what you get. It's like a mini Moshiach payment. And the harder you work during the week, the more godliness gets revealed to you on Shabbos, and the more God refills your tank with more energy for the upcoming week. This is the real avodah. This is the real work. It's not how many boxes you shipped in your Amazon business this week. It's a totally different reality. So I can't go through all the questions because I have to continue on, but the Tetragrammaton is one of the manifestations of God's name. He has 72 names that he uses to manifest himself. It's a Shem HaMafarsh. It's a very high, lofty name of God. But God's essence is much, much higher than the name Havaya, which is the tetragrammaton. Okay, v'yesh l'mar she'iyas hacheshbon tzedek haShabbos parshas Noach al shavua harishon she'avodas b'foal, that on the Shabbos, when we do a righteous accounting of how our first work week went in revealing God in the world, it's necessary to have this action, this work in reality. And this is what the Rebbe said, what I just said a moment ago, that the main ultimate purpose of this world is to reveal Havaya Hu Elokim. That is what it's about. And this matter is also connected to the service of Tshuva. Shuva, Yisrael Havaya Lokecha, return, Jewish people, to Hashem your God. Shenita Shuva hi ba'ifrin shehavaya nase Elokecha. V'oid l'shleimas Shuva Yom HaKippurim Tesiyum v'chaisim amiras ze'ayin pa'amin Havaya Elokim. That's why we said at the end of Yom Kippur, Havaya Elokim, Havaya Elokim 7 times. V'hasam l'kach nase gam cheshbon tzedek ba'ifrin alis yoser k'lekam. Zion, Hagdama. I don't think people realize how powerful this week is of Noah, and how powerful this Shabbat is coming up. The Rebbe says, first we have to understand that every Jew, as the Rambam said, is presumed to be kosher. In other words, we must have a good eye for one another. We should never look at someone with a bad eye. We should always start with the premise of this person is kosher. And this is how we must relate to others. Well, I forgot what a strong sikha this is. I don't know why my screen keeps flashing. I don't know if it's only on my end, but it's annoying. Very powerful. The Rebbe said, when we're looking at another, we must look with a good eye and say, this person is holy, they're kosher. I must look to them favorably, but not with yourself, because we delude ourselves. We delude ourselves that we do bad things, and we say, I guess God wanted me to do this, right? Like, I have guys at the center like, God wanted me to go to a strip club last night. Why would you say that? Well, I went there, so that must be what he wanted. No, that doesn't mean he wanted it, because that's why you were there. If you do something wrong, if you act like a jerk, if you rip someone off, if you assault another person, if you whatever bad activities you do, you can't say, oh, that's what God wanted. But what we can say is, wait a minute, I need to be realistic with myself and realize I screwed up. I did something wrong. Not sugarcoat it and say, oh, this is what God wanted. It's what I did. It's what I said. I smacked this person. I smacked my wife in the face. God wanted me to do it. I wouldn't have done it. No. But afterwards, we have to be honest. We have to look through a clear lens, and we have to do tshuva. And we have to say to ourselves, we have to constantly examine ourselves. We have to constantly look inside of ourselves and constantly look for corrections of what we need to fix in ourselves. Because it's self-delusion. We always want to look at ourselves in a positive light, if you will. And therefore, it says all the matters in Machshava, Divor, and Maisa. We have to be a righteous accounting of not only what we do to others, how we act, and not only what comes out of our mouth and how we speak, but what our thoughts are. And the thoughts are difficult, because until you're able of becoming an observer, until you become hyper-present in your reality, right? Most people are not present. They're here, but they're somewhere else. They're not here. When you're hyper-present, you could become aware of the thoughts that are flowing through your mind and realize you're not your thoughts. When you're not hyper-present, your thoughts take you every which way, and next you're like, hello, you're talking to someone like, oh, yeah, whatever, or they're driving and they're just zooming, missing exits, they're not paying attention to what's going on. They're not here. That means their thoughts have taken control of them, and they're just going where their thoughts are, which are a very dangerous thing, because those thoughts are coming rapidly, and they're not always good, and they're not always productive. And so we have to pause and say, where are these thoughts coming from? Why am I having these thoughts? And how to deal with those things, and not just assume, oh, that's just me. And therefore, when we are aware and we follow all the details of our thoughts, our speech, and our deeds, we're able to fix what is wrong, right? You have to be honest with yourself, which is why a lot of, it's important to have a mashpia, it's important to have a guide, because a lot of times it's hard to be honest with yourself because you don't see yourself as you really are. You see yourself as you perceive yourself. And furthermore, the tiknam, the shlema, and b'masa before mamasa hu'ik. And of course, the most important thing is to fix your deeds, because the most important thing is the deed, right? How do you know you passed the test? Because God put you in the same situation, maybe not the same specific facts, and sees what happens if you act like the same ass or you change your ways. The tikkun hamasa b'fal b'noga v'shrach, the tshuva atzmai, and the fixing up in actuality is connected to tshuva itself, return. The afshi ikar tshuva halev, because the main tshuva is in the heart. Everything is connected to the heart. That is the whole purpose of creation. Bria, Bina, the mother, the feminine energy. It's the same place as the divine throne in the world of Bria. Everything is connected to the heart. And if you're disconnected from your heart, it's very hard to do proper tshuva. So first we have to go through that coarseness of our hearts and enter deep places. Saktin hagamara shaide harachor tshuva nasit tzadi. Harizet, we must have an honest reflection, a righteous accounting, no BS. If you do proper tshuva in your heart, it will lead to proper deed. You'll be able to fix things and work in a proper way. And we also have to emphasize tshuva not only with you and yourself, but between you and others. Eino nimchal lo da'olam ad shiteinu lechaverav mahu chayav lo yitzraho. K'mo shekasuv hashiv as gezela asher gazal b'dugma b'gezila b'kdamas hein lo v'lo chazim shaloim gezilas ad tochem. It's very interesting. I said this to someone else the other day. The Rebbe, I don't know where is this part out from. That it says, if you say hello to someone and they don't return the hello to you, it's considered as theft. Gemara brachas. That's a heavy one. So Rebbe is explaining, of course, the importance of Ahavas Yisrael, and that to greet others with a good countenance, and to be nice to others, and kind to others. And if someone says hello, you say hello back. And this righteous accounting that we do must be done in all the details. And they must come into actuality. In other words, everything comes to the deed, right? As they say, talk is cheap, You do something wrong to someone, you say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, honey. I'm really sorry about it. And then you do it again the next day. So are you sorry? You try to be nice. How do you know you're sorry? You stop doing it, right? If someone that you care about and you're harming them and they tell you this is bothering me and you keep doing it, well, that's a problem. Because it has to come to reality. Maisa before actual deed. לפי הערך ביחס להמידידה והגבלה לפרטים שמנוח ועוסק בתיכון שלהם. כל פרטי לפני every little detail. ישנה אופן על יסר שתרמוס. Apashposh, Bamase, Hariyoma Lasa, the Darga Valas, Lalas Yoiser, Yois, Monach, the Gamri, but Fila, but Torah. But Derek Minel Yahar, Mizbat, when you be Tiritsui, Kivan, Shemaat, or Doicha, Harbe Hoishech. And a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. Lachas come harbe, or how much more so a lot of light. Abel le'erech, bo'efin zeh. לא מודגש התיכון והשלמות ענייני הפרטים, כיוון שאינו מתעסק בהם. In a way that it's not emphasized the tikkun in a complete way in all the details, since it's not, in other words, everything has to come to shlemut, to completion. And in order for that, it has to be all the details. I'm sure you've heard the saying that the devil's in the details, right? Well, the opposite is true. God is in the details. They teach you in business, the riches are in the niches. The more you can get into the minutia of things, the details of things. I was talking to a guy, a whole long story. It's not for today's conversation, where the guy spent 2 years on a business deal where his cut was 0.5%. It was $1 billion deal. It's a lot of money. So the details, it's I know people who've made vast amounts of money splicing details. There's a guy I know who just random things, motorhomes. He figured out how to make specific components for 5 cents cheaper. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're supplying millions and millions and millions on a yearly basis of these things, it makes a big difference. Everything's about the details. It's the same thing with our lives. We live usually with broad strokes, but God lives in the fine details and the fine strokes, right? It's like a contract. You got to read the details. You got to read. If you don't pay attention to the little details, you could get lost. And it's the same thing with your life. If you're fixing just general things about yourself, but you don't notice your blind spots, you don't notice the things that you keep doing over and over and over again because they're nuanced, then you get lost. And the Rebbe says, and so we have to combine these two things together. What are they? A complete righteous accounting of what's going on and fixing up and a completion of all the details. And then we will go to higher places. And therefore it will come down to all the specific details. This is another aspect of revealing the name Havaya, the name Elohim. That God wants, when it says that God wants to live down here in the lower worlds, it doesn't just mean generally, right? It means in our lives. It means first in your hearts, in your brain, in your body, with your wife, with your children, in your home, in your community, in your shul, in your business dealings, in every aspect of your life, every detail. If there's a detail in your life that God is not present in, it's not a dir b'tachtani. The problem is a lot of times we don't want to let God in because God is taking us to places that we may be afraid of going or that we don't want to go. So what happens? We have a blockage. And when there's a blockage, a disconnect happens. And that's when things don't work properly and you lose what is called as a state of flow. That's why we must keep things flowing. And this is where we bring about these details in Parshas Noach. The shleimus, the regash, shel tza'ar u'marirois. And the Rebbe says, and if, for example, when you are doing your righteous accounting, kivan shenirgash etzel bi'ikar, to nuas his others the darkest knowledge yoiser. Lamshicham his galoisei beinin hapratim ba'omek yoiser shenigash etzel akavana. Hadira lematzar matzav chidush tikun hu bishvil shlemas shenasa aideh tshuva. The Rebbe says when you're sifting through the details, right? It's like someone's checking rice for bugs, right? They're a mashgiach. They're checking rice for bugs. So you find a bug, what do you take it out. You don't go into a tissy fit. So sometimes, and again, this is hard work. If we're really honest with ourselves, this is not easy work because we all have blind spots. We all set up places in our peripheral that we pretend don't exist. And how do we know when we get triggered? When someone triggers us and we explode, um, whether that's verbally or inside, or that anger starts coming, there's a spot that needs to be fixed. And we could blame it on outside realities, but it's nothing to do with outside. Whatever happens outside is just reflecting a trigger that's deep inside from previous matters. Otherwise, we would just deal with what's going on outside and it wouldn't piss us off. Okay, this sucks. I got to deal with this, but we wouldn't explode. So to find those triggers and to find those details is exhausting work. And it's a work that has to continue. And it's not one and done. It's not that you go to therapy once and you're finished. You say, okay, I healed myself. Now I'm good. Right? It doesn't work that way. You don't change your oil once in your car and say, okay, I'm good for the next 20 years. You have to keep working on yourself over and over and over again. And you need help from outside people. You can't free yourself from prison. There's only so much you could decipher on your own. You can't see these blind spots. And so the Rebbe says when you're honest and you dig deep and you find these blind spots and you come to the awareness of, holy crap, wow, I got a problem here. I got to work on. Don't become depressed. Don't become despondent. Don't start beating yourself up because then that's going to lead to sadness and bitterness. Rather, know this is part of your tshuva. And it's a blessing, right? They say knowing is half the battle. Knowing, you know what? I need to work on my anger. I need to work on my stress. I need to work on my ego. I need to work on my attitude. I need to work on my whatever it is, fill in the blank, my sadness. We all have things we need to work on, but we have to first realize they exist. Because the second we say, okay, whatever, I'm a human being, okay, so what do you want from me? Okay, so you're never going to fix the problem because we are human. But the Rebbe wants us to be superhuman. He wants us to say to be human is one thing, but to be godly is a whole nother reality. And to become godly means you have to have a relationship with God, and God cannot coexist in any dark places. So this is lifetime work, by the way. This is not one and done. I figured it out. I checked the box. I'm moving on. It's constantly re-engaging. And that's what the Rebbe is emphasizing, the importance of this week of work. It's not the work of just going into the world. It's the work of working on yourself and your surroundings and digging deep and finding these dark places. And instead of causing stress or worry or aggravation, saying, how do I do tshuva? How am I going to fix them? How am I going to go deeper inside of this? She's gathered before and what happens is it will strengthen our bond with God. Right? God's not angry at us. God's not saying you schmucky putz. God's just saying, listen, fix it. Whatever you didn't do right, fix it. Learn from it. And this will bring us through revealing the name Havaya and the name Elohim, meaning you will find God in all these places. And in fact, if you're honest with yourself, this little place of pain, of the realization of what you're lacking or what you need to work on, will bring you to great joy and pleasure. Thank you, God, for allowing me to see what I need to do. Now I need to do it, right? Talk to people about plant medicine sometimes. It's a whole different discussion. But it's not a miracle pill. But if it's done properly, plant medicine gives you a perspective. It doesn't heal you, but it allows you to see what's wrong from an honest lens because you pull out of your ego. The ego blocks everything. And everyone says, I'm not an egomaniac. Everyone's an egomaniac. There's two sides of the ego coin. One is an outward, one is an inward. One is talking and feeling how wonderful you are, and one is inward depression of how miserable you are. It's all ego, and it all blocks your true divine identity. And the idea is to be aware of where those blockages are, and then you could work on them. And then when you release those spots, that's great joy. That's great happiness. Yes. So this is this sikh is like a master class on working on yourself and tshuva and healing. There's so much depth in here. I I know the Sikh is pretty well, but it escaped me at how deep and how amazing the Sikh is. Ches, and this is also connected to Shabbats. That we see the idea of Noach is connected to Menucha, which is connected to Shabbats. It's a day of rest for Hashem. By drawing down and revealing the name Havaya, the name Elokim, and God rested on the seventh day. What is Shabbos? The Rebbe is telling you very beautiful. Shabbos is when the tzimtzum, the concealment, the hiding of Elokim, the hiding of Havaya in Elokim is revealed. In Shabbat, you don't have to work to reveal God. He's there. That's why we say Shabbat Shalom. It's peace. You're not struggling anymore. You're not in a struggle to reveal Havaya in Elokim. Havaya is revealed in Elokim. Shabbat also has the same letters of Tshuv. Return, Tshuva. The Tshuva, the Shabbos, he Tshuva, Iliyah. It's a higher Tshuva. He besimcha rabba, to a tremendous great joy. It's not a Tshuva from, there's two levels of descent, if you will, of the feminine attributes. You have Malchus and you have Bina. Bina is a descent from Chochmah, and Malchus is a descent from Zah, both the masculine energies. So lower Tshuva is from Malchus to Zah, which is a Tshuva of getting out of the dirt, of getting out of the klipot. Higher Tshuva on Shabbat is up from Bina or Bria to Chochmah. It's a higher Tshuva of connection to your true identity, your true purpose, your true oneness with God. In a way of negating all the negative things. In other words, lower tshuva is negating the negative things. Higher tshuva is he's Torah by reaching a higher level, which is through the Panemius Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, Kabbalah, and Chassidus, and the ultimate complete way. Where you're spirit to spirit with God, you can't access your inner dimensions of God or your hearts without accessing the inner dimensions of the Torah. It's impossible. When you live in the Nigla, in Halacha and Gomorrah, wonderful things, they're part of the equation. You're dealing with Chetzoni Halev. You're dealing with the outer part of reality, of how to act, what to do, what not to do. It's very important. It's very robotic. It's a very way of serving God. Do this, don't do this, do this. Great. But the love and the fear, the awe, the oneness of God, which is the inner dimension of God, can only be accessed through the inner dimension of the Torah. And just like we have a body and soul, the Torah is a body and soul. And the Nigla is the body of the Torah, and the Chassidus and Kabbalah is the soul of the Torah. And if you want to access God's soul, the inner parts, in the inner part of your soul, you have to go deep into Chassidus and Kabbalah. There's so many Sfarim now that are translated into English. There's no reason why anyone shouldn't be learning all these things. And we do it here. We're learning Chassidus on Monday night and Kabbalah on Wednesday night. Okay. And going even deeper. You can reach a state of oneness with God through traversing and working in the inner dimensions of the Torah. And your whole existence becomes nullified. The Torah becomes a bridge, a pathway between you and God's. And this is a foretaste of how things will be in the days of Mashiach. A Rambam, B'siyam, V'choisim, Tzifrei, B'oisim, Hazman, Deimor HaTorah, B'oifin, Kamayim, Yam Kachsim. The knowledge of God will be cover the earth like the water covers the ocean bed. V'yesh Lamor, this to say, the Hoisivik Sudim Mishav Shabbos, Parshas Noach, Mudgash, Yoiser, B'tshuva, B'msibcha. Shabbos Noach emphasizes the concept of tshuva, B'simcha, with joy. Kivan, Sheboyim, Ze'atam, Chodesh, Tishrei. Since we are on the end of the month of Tishrei, Oh no. Ein oimrim hatachnoin. We're finishing up. I'm not saying tachnun. Ad suyim l'chshah chodesh. Shmetchilim no more ha'inin ha'bechodesh mar cheshbon. In regalayim adinu amiras tachnoin. There's no festivals in cheshbon. We have to say tachnun every day. Lochim mudgash yoyser b'simcha she'avodat teshuva. And this also emphasizes this concept of tshuva and simcha, because we are now finishing up these days of joy, right, in the month of Tishrei, which is the ultimate simcha. Test. And this is also emphasized in this year that the Rebbe gave the Sikha in Nun Beis. Again, we started the cycle. We're still in the middle of it, but Nun Beis are the most recent Sikhas of the Rebbe. Bagdam, first of all, that even the previous Rebbe said all the work is done, all the buttons have been polished, meaning preparations for Mashiach. And we're all standing and prepared to receive Mashiach. And we are now working on this deep righteous accounting in these particular days. Immediately, we should have the true and complete redemption. But Pratius Yosher more specifically. What time is it? It's okay, we're doing that. גם כשידיע איניש בנפשי מעמדו למצב שהם אצלו ענייני הצריכים תיקון, אין זה בסחיר חס ושלום לעבוד דאיסוי של נשיא דורנו שבכל נשלמה באורז ואומר מכנים הקבל פנים אשר ציקנו, כי עבודה בכלל זמנית למשל כל דורש שיחה להיות בזמן הגלוס כדי לבוא לשלם את הגאולה. The Rebbe is further elucidating this point, because it's a point that is confused a lot in these sikhas, where the Rebbe says all the work is done. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, and the previous Rebbe said, all the work is done, everything's ready for Geula. All we have to do is stand and accept Mashiach. So again, there's two works. We have Klalit and Pratit. The Rebbe is saying now that the work of Am Yisrael, the Jewish people as a nation, have fulfilled our covenant with God, with our agreement of helping him make this world a place, a dwelling for God, through Torah, mitzvot, and prayer for the last 3,500 years, whatever, since we got the Torah. That doesn't mean that you don't have tshuva to do. That doesn't mean that your individual work is complete, because if you're a tzaddik, then I guess you're okay. But if you're not, well, guess what? You still have more work to do. So the Rebbe said it's not a contradiction to realize that you have to keep working on yourself and fixing yourself, but know that there's nothing standing in the way for Mashiach to come. And again, this is not a contradiction to the redemption happening. Again, individually, we have a lot to fix up. Don't think you don't. But this is not a contradiction that the Jewish people in general have done whatever they need to do for Mashiach to come. The Rebbe said the most important thing is that all the work we do must be done with simcha. A lot of times people are afraid to go deep in their hearts and their unconscious. People are afraid to go to therapy. People are afraid to go deep in therapy because there's a lot inside there. I know. I've cleared out some painful stuff in the inner resources of my unconscious mind, and it's frightening. But guess what? That's where all the vampires are. That's where all your energy gets sucked. That's where all that negativity comes from, and you got to flush it out. If you don't go through it, it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And it's an onion. Don't think you peel one layer and everything's healed. Okay, I know what to do now. I got to figure it out. No, it's constantly deeping. You know how deep our unconscious is? You know how deep childhood wounds are inside? When you're a child in your formative years from 0 to 7, even up into your teen years, you're the inner essence of the sponge. You sucked all that traumatic experience in and built layers and layers and layers. And now we're over here and we peel off a layer. We're like, okay, I figured it out. I know what's going on. No, we got to keep going deep. because that's where all the well springs are. That's where the blessings are. And the Rebbe said, I know this is painful work, but you got to do it b'simcha. You have to find a way to bring joy to it. Explain it in a different way. Nimsa mamdenu matzava dam shalema kol ramach ivrim v'shasai yidim, that the Jewish people in general represent one complete nation, just like a person has 248 limbs and 365 connecting tissues. Hein beruchnius, hein begashmis, spiritually and physically. V'chasroim v'haprati komo miuchash o chilui kol v'chitzuni v'avrei prati. And just like there's specific maybe things off with one of these limbs or these connecting tissues, Yirafeh, and they will be healed. Shinatar reshus the refuah. Same idea with tshuva. Tshuva is healing these things of the limbs, right? Just like if there's something sick in a body, a lot of times our spiritual sicknesses and the things that we have not cleared out manifest themselves into physical ailments. And through the continuation of the Frierdiker Rebbe's leadership up into our days and times. And after all, many periods of time. It says the Rebbe gave the Sikha exactly 40 years after the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. 40 years after he took over as Rebbe, and the Rebbe brings the quote. It says, it takes 40 years to internalize the teachings of your rabbi, of your Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, after 40 years of this period from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Hashem has given us a heart to know, eyes to see, and ears to hear. A lot going on here. Hearts, leiv, this is connected to zah, to your emotional attributes and malchus in your behavior, the lower sefirot. Eyes is chokhmah. Ears here is bina. Meaning every person has the potential to reach shleimut in their lives, to reach perfection in their lives, because we have the tools and we have the map of how to reach this, what we call tikkun in our lives. There's no door that is closed. There's nothing we can't access at this point in this stage of reality. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's there. Allah has come up how much more so do we see yourself in this year, Tafshin Nun Base, Shirasha Tevas, after Tashin and Aldif, I will show you wonders within everything, in everything whatsoever. And the greatest wonder is I will show you redemption, like when I took you out of Egypt, I will show you wonders. And after we finish the first month of the year, Tishrei, Oisius Reishis, which is the same letter as the beginning, Shklal Kahashana Kula, which starts off the whole entire year. Oindim Yom HaShabbos Harishon, as we're standing in the first Shabbos of Shleimus Avodas Olam, of the completion of the work in the world. Shabo Mudgash Klal Lois Inyan Shabbos Shekashtar Imagulu. And we can see as emphasized even more the connection between Shabbos and redemption. Rapat Yom Shabbos La'achei Hatzois. Specifically after Chatzois, Hazman the Suda Shlishi Sekeshorim Yaakov, the third meal of Shabbos connected to Yaakov. Shlishi Sha'avos, the third of the Avos, connected Gula HaShlishi, so Beis HaMikdash Shlishi, which is connected to the third Beis HaMikdash, Umechananim, Hakriya, Torah, Lech Lecha. Then we read Lech Lecha, which we spoke about earlier. Aretz HaSha'arecha, to the land I will show you. Sivoy, and this is a special power that is given to every single one of us to do Lech Lecha. The Chlalus, this is the idea. By doing true Lech Lecha, this is how we bring about redemption, by going out of your comfort zone and jumping into Hashem's arms. And the Rebbe said, for sure, without a question, we've reached the end of the times of the exile. Ukavar asat tshuva, and we've already done tshuva. Akshav ein hadavar tilui ela b'Mashiach tikenu ba'atzma. And this is a very comforting and troubling pasuk that haunts me. Because the Rebbe said, for sure, we've reached the end of all the work. And for sure, we already did tshuva. And now, the only thing that is left is dependent on Mashiach himself. That's a tough one. And I can't really explain it. Because if it's only depending on Mashiach himself, I don't know what he's waiting for. I really don't. Yud. The hemshech la'amidu bar la'el oides cheshbon tzedek, and a connection to what we said before, that we must make a righteous accounting. Specifically, it's connected to the redemption. They shall orer al derek choispa v'chaz re-rois dior b'kidus levana shachlios are the teichen ineniam morim the aisle kettle common. The Rebbe is talking about the importance of doing kidus levana with proper intention. This helps bring geula. Kiyom ha'oyna ba'ofen yoyim halayla lo yishuvoisoi tilui melech hachama levana, that the world is dependent on the movement of the sun and the moon. And the God had set them in their gilgulim, in their circles, in their cycles. God set the planets in the firmament and separated between day and night. Burachas koidem levana, and the special blessing we say on the Kiddush levana and blessing of the moon. Hazak v'zman nois nechem kol shlois nai es tekufim. Hazak hu davar kavod shemesh b'yom ha'reach v'layla. God set the sun to rule by day and the moon to rule by night. Excuse me. V'zman v'selahem dechaynon zaman sivoy v'galgo halavana kol v'mochin yud beis tishitzach. All the different movements of the cycle on the moon. Okay. Bior begadol hilui hakadusha levan kamarizal. Excuse me. Whoever greets the moon on a monthly basis and says the blessing on the moon, you're literally greeting God's divine presence, the Shekhinah. It says in Kiddush Levana that even if all we did is come into this world to merit to bless the moon once a month and to greet our Father in heaven, his Shekhinah's divine presence, this would be enough. In the future, we will be renewed like the moon. This is special, talking about the Jewish people. And then we will greet the face of the Shekhinah, and the moon and the sun will be one and the same. And it says, God will remove his name Elohim from the name Havaya, and it will shine, and the sun and the moon will shine equally. Okay, Yura. In a deeper way, and explaining these concepts briefly, as we're coming to an end of the Sikha, according to Kabbalah and Hasidus, the Vana, the moon, Kai Al Sfiras HaMalchus, is referring to the spirit of Malchus. Leisla Megamara Kulam, that the sphere of Malchus does not have anything in of itself; it receives from the higher Sfirot. Makabalas Ores B'Chama Uchinazat, it receives from the light of the sun, which is Zar Anpin. Shemes Havaya, which is the son of Havaya. And from there it's drawn down into the Shem Elohim. Shemesh Omegain Havaya Elohim, which is like the guard, if you will, the shield. All let's see the vote. And the moon will be healed of its diminishment in the future to come. And the name Havaya and the name Elohim. Havaya is like the sun, Elohim is like the moon. They will both shine equally as bright. In other words, God will be revealed in all capacities. There is to say, Kiddush Levana, Niremas, Klados, Masina, Hagalus, is hinted in general in the service that we do in the times of the exile. And that through this will come to the true and complete redemption. The ultimate purpose of creation, that God will have a dwelling place below. And there's no further lowest reality than this physical reality from God, and therefore God's light is concealed in this world. And therefore God created the world through the name Elokim, which conceals his countenance. And then we will draw down and reveal the name Havaya, will be revealed God's essence, his name, will be revealed in the days of Mashiach. And then the whole world will be a dwelling place for God's essence. And then God's will be complete, and he will have a dwelling place and live here down in this lower world with us. Yud base, and according to what we've said above. And the righteous accounting that each one of us will do in this week, connected to the service in the first week of the actual world. The year that God will show us wonders. And we said that everything is only relying on Mashiach himself now. And we could help hasten his arrival, the Rebbe says, through saying Kiddush Levana in a proper way. Because in the future we will be renewed like the moon. The call of the Rosh, first of all, the Chazar, the Hashtadel, Yosef Kiddush Levana. It's important to have the proper Seder and keep Kiddush Levana. The Gedim Chashuvim, we usually say it on Motzi Shabbat, where we're still wearing our fine clothes. You want to dress up properly for the occasion. And it should be in a way for a king, like we're greeting a king. In Gimel, you mean there's different opinions according to when you say Kiddush Levana, but the general opinion we do is the first Shabbat between the 7th of the month. First Shabbat after the 7th of the month. Usually the 14th or 15th of the month is the latest you can bless the moon, but you want to do it after the 7 days have passed on Motzi Shabbat. That's what our custom is. It's going through all the different possibilities of, according to the different opinions of when you bless the moon. And furthermore, Kiddush Levana metoich kavana michad mahar v'hazro the fall techach miyad mash boy David Malcham Mashiach. The Rebbe said the most important thing is when you do Kiddush Levana, whatever your custom is when to do it, you should have the intention that this is helping bring Mashiach. And a request for the redemption, as we'd say in Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana. Okay. Yud Gimel. Yiratzon be God's will. So that even before we do Kiddush Levana in this month of Mar Cheshvan, and Shnehem Ma'eluim. Yishna Shloisha Chadashim Shalemus. The completion of these months, Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev. The Hemshech Echad in one continuation. Nasias Chazaka, which is Hazaka, strengthening. But Chilas, Hashana, Shlemus, Chadash. Shirumas, as all Hashlemus, the Beneso, Shasti, the Chadash, Kamois. And just like the Jewish people will be renewed in the future to come, like the moon. Kayam, Bano, Mikra, Shikosu, Vakashes, Es Hashem Adokecha, as David Malcham. Amen. And Mashiach will surely come right away. But pashtus, and in a simple way. That immediately, as we're even before the time of Mincha, when we say Lech Lecha, that you will go out from the land that it will show you. Or at Tzena Kedusha, to the Holy Land, we should travel. Then it says Minhar, Mitzrayim, Ad, Minhar, and Gadol, and God will take us to the holy mountain. Eretz Esar Amos, and we'll have all 10 lands. But Eretzeno Kedusha Atzma, and the whole land will become holy. Ben Tzad Yushalayim Har Har Homaria Shem Gufa Al Shem Misbeach. They'll go to the holy mountain. V'Shem Nasa Lefanecha Kamitzah Maritzecha. Klo Am Hashlemas Kedusha Levana Ba'Efan Shemakalim Panei Shechina. And then we will do Kiddush Levana in the proper way. We will really accept the Shechina. Yira al Elokim b'Tzion, and God will return and we will see him at Tzion. And even more than this, al Panei Ha'adayin Havaya, we will literally see the face of God. Klal Gam Yichad Shem Havaya, including really the name Shem Havaya. B'Shem Elokim Shemudgash B'Kiddush Levana. And the name Shem Elokim we say in Kiddush Levana. And reminding us, Havayahu Elokim. It's the same concealed God and revealed God. And it will go from level to level. Zayin Pa'amim, 7 times. Havayahu Elokim. Yom Kippur, as we said in Nira and Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe finishes up the Sikha and said, Havayahu Elokim, Havayahu Elokim, Havayahu Elokim, Havayahu Elokim, Havayahu Elokim, Havayahu Elokim, the Shana Haba Yerushalayim. That's how the Rebbe finished the Sikha. Exactly the nusak of finishing up Yom Kippur. To show you how important this week is and how the Rebbe is emphasizing so much the importance of doing a righteous accounting of how our week is going in our service of God, in our service of ourselves, and amongst others. And Hashem should bless us that this power that we all have right now after Bereshit should be brought into this world in a revealed way, that God should reveal our Mashiach and take us out of the galus and avenge our blood, and we should have the fullest galus of Melech Mashiach right now. God bless you. See you in the Beis Hamikdash.